A very, very, very good morning. Welcome. So nice of you to join us here at the European Industry and Energy Summit, the second edition, a very special edition, of course. We're here at the Kromhouthal in Amsterdam. You're probably sitting at home at your desk or your home office or, well, wherever you are, welcome. Very nice to have you here. I'm almost alone here. Last year, 600 people attended. My name is Joost Hoebink, and I'm your moderator of today and tomorrow as well. I told you I'm almost alone because I've got two wonderful gentlemen sitting behind me. I will introduce them later. And of course, there is a fantastic co-host. It's Mr. Wim Raayen, Editor-in-Chief of Petrochem and CEO CEO of this whole thing of Industry Links. Wim, can you hear me? Where are you today?
Yes, I can hear you. I'm in the Eemshaven, and you can already see it. There are the windmills, and behind that is the Engie power station. And now I walk a little bit this way.
Yeah.
And then something is appearing, and that's the RWE power station.
The RWE power plant, okay, and basically what we're seeing, because we see the energy transition, well, happening right behind you, because we also see a lot of windmills over there at the Eemshaven.
Very big ones. I'm beneath a very big one, but without the rotors, or how do you say it?
Yeah,
but it's
without the blades,
going on here. It's going on here.
It's really going on. The energy transition is taking place at this moment. And Wim, you're not only there to look at the power plants and the windmills, because there's also a studio in Groningen, in the Eemshaven, because we have two separate programs today. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yes, the studio is in that building over there, Nijlicht, in Eemshaven. And we are talking a lot about hydrogen. And what steps have to be taken now to reach all that fantastic goals, but there is no signature yet for a big project signed. So let's talk about the next steps to come in hydrogen.
And of course, the big news yesterday when RWE and Equinor announced that they will join the North H2 hydrogen project of Shell and GasUnie. What do you think about that?
Sure, we will talk about that later. And what I think about it, I think you need a lot of very proactive coalitions. That is one of the next steps to make, because to lower the costs, you need a lot of critical mass, I think.
All right. Well, you will be talking about that today. And I guess at the talk show table behind me, we will talk about hydrogen as well. Wim, good luck today in Groningen. Tomorrow we'll meet again, but then you are in the southern part of the Netherlands, in Limburg at Gemmelot. And I will be joining you then from Rotterdam, from our main port, of course. But today you're in Groningen, I'm in the Kromhouthal, and we're going to start the program here. Wim, good luck, and we speak each other tomorrow.
You also good luck, and yes, tomorrow in the south, and for a Dutchman, that's a whole distance to take. But that's only Dutch.
You have to take the plane.
Yes.
All right.
See you.
See you tomorrow.
Bye-bye.
All right, to officially open the program, we have a great guest here at the studio. He is the port alderman of Amsterdam, and he is ready to open the program here with me, ladies and gentlemen. Victor Everts. Victor, welcome here.
Thank you. Thank you.
Today, we asked you to open the program. You're responsible for the port of Amsterdam, and you have a lot of other tasks as well. We're here at the Kromhouthal. This is a place of big history for Amsterdam, isn't it?
Yes, here's the harbor, in the heart of the old harbor, and the harbor of Amsterdam has moved from east to west, and it's still moving on, but it's still a vibrant surrounding.
2020 was a bit of a strange year. Well, that's an understatement.
That's quite an understatement, I would say.
But when you look at the volumes of the harbor of Amsterdam, was it a good year still, or was it?
It was still a good year.
Okay.
It was not as good as last year, but still it's one of the main pillars underneath the economical sector here in the metropolitan area of Amsterdam. So we're lucky to have this beautiful harbor.
That's great.
The fourth of Europe.
The fourth of Europe. Yeah, that's great. And the second of the Netherlands, of course.
Yes, of course.
Well, very nice to have you here to open the summit.
Yes.
You prepared something for us.
Yeah, thank you. Prepared
Right.
speech. Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm very glad that so many of you are attending this online conference, live from Amsterdam. Of course, I would have liked to welcome you here in person, but we have to leave that for another occasion, I think. For now, I will say the show must go on, and I promise you it will be an entertaining, inspiring, and highly relevant show today and tomorrow. Now, as you may know, the Dutch are very famous for their relationship with wind and water. Just visit our countryside and you see remaining windmills, the old ones, that stand as a testament of our innovative ways of making use of natural resources. We are admired for this throughout the world, and it hasn't always worked in our advantage, I would say. While other countries invest in coal and feed those magic machines called steam engines, the Dutch had their money tied up in wind and water power. Of course, these energy sources were cheaper and readily available to us at that time. This was little left of our adventures, and the industrial revolution of the Netherlands took off much a century later than in the UK of this. Today, we are standing on the verge of a new industrial revolution, one that evolves exactly the opposite way of direction of the previous one. Fossil energy sources are abundantly available and relatively cheap right now, and sustainable energy sources such as solar, wind and hydrogen are in high demand. This time, we cannot afford to stay 100 years behind, which last industrial revolution took place. And we don't have to, I would say, because we share the conviction that investing in innovation and infrastructure to make and distribute the green energy is a way forward for our country. And I'm the first to admit it is more easily said than done. Take the port of Amsterdam, for example, one of the biggest energy ports of Europe. Solid and liquid fuels are being imported and exported from and to our port in large quantities. These fossil fuels have a huge source of economic growth and employment, but are also part of our problem. Or let's call it a challenge instead. Because we can turn tables once again. And this time it will not take that long, I will promise you. Because we have the knowledge and the infrastructure to become one of the biggest producers and distributors of sustainable energy in Europe. The fossil-driven factories of today can be transformed to the green energy products or producers of tomorrow. The pipes that currently transport jet fuel from the port of Amsterdam to the airport can be repurposed as a transport for green synthetic kerosene. We have the space and the skills to capture carbon emissions from both storage and utilization. And sustainable energy provided by offshore wind turbines in the North Sea can be readily used and stored. Now, of course, transitions of this scales and impact take time, effort, and above all, a shared vision and commitment. We strongly believe the Amsterdam port area has the potential to become a green battery for the rest of the country and other parts of Europe, of course. But we can only build that battery together. And big industry has an important role to play. These companies are a vital source of jobs, growth, and especially in these times, that's a very important issue. And they can make the biggest impact on our challenge.
not by paying lip service to sustainability, not with greenwashing, but with fundamentally changing their ways, their means of production, their business models, their way of thinking. The potential is there, ladies and gentlemen. And it's also the intellectual capital is there. Opportunities and possibilities are omnipresent. And this is very encouraging, I would say. The willingness to change is stronger than ever. We know that. Not just in the port of Amsterdam, but all over Europe. This summit is about change and about how can we help to inspire each other in taking the necessary steps ahead, one at a time, to reach a common goal to make our new sustainable industrial revolution happen. Our city and our country are more willing to lead this challenge with you. It's going to be the real challenge to make this thing work. And you can count on us to bring everything we've got and everything we have learned since our glorious windmill days centuries ago. It won't take 100 years. Let's make the next step. I wish you a pleasant and a very successful summit. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Victor Everts, a port element of the city of Amsterdam. So let's make the port of Amsterdam the battery, the green battery for Europe. That's a big dream of the Elderman. Let's talk about that. Let's go to the table. With me here at the table are the two wonderful gentlemen I already mentioned at the opening of the program, and it's now time to introduce them. On the left, we have David van Baarle. David, you're my sidekick today at this program. You're editor-in-chief of Industry Links.
Industry Links magazine, yes.
Of the magazine, over 20 years of experience in the field as a journalist, always focusing on combining industry and energy, making that work, like the green battery the Alderman just talked about.
Yeah, there's lots to discuss in our magazine, in our world of industry and energy, and I think we have a wonderful cast here today that can show us how the future until 2030 or maybe even 2050 will look like. So I'm very excited to see what's happening today.
All right, it's really a great program we've got for you today. And David, you're not only my sidekick, but you're also the voice of the audience.
I'm the voice
you
of
have
the
to explain that.
Yeah, we all have the app, so you can have it on the phone, or you can have
the network app. Please download it. Yeah.
And there is in the network app you have a quest and answer part, and every question that you ask me, not every question, of course. I can only ask a few questions, but please feed me through the app, and I will ask the questions to the audience or to the
very good
speakers.
So,
yeah.
If you're joining us today, welcome again. Please download the network app. We already sent you an invite through email, and then use the Q&A section in the app. Ask everything you want to our speakers, make recommendations, make compliments, also hate emails, everything you can send in through the app, because we have David here live on stage, and he is my filter, and he's also your voice. So the best questions, the best recommendations will be, we use them here in the program. Next to David is my first guest of the talk show of today, André Fay, Scientific Director at TNO. Your job is to make the energy transition work, basically. So welcome here. We need you because, at the opening statement we heard that there's a new industrial revolution coming up. It's already happening, of course, but we need fundamental research for that, and that's what you're doing at TNO.
Right. Yes. The research is a key component, of course, of what we want to achieve. Innovation, in general, is an essential ingredient to make this whole transition work.
And that's why you partner up with us today here at the program. Later on the program, we've got 4 TNO sessions, 4 TNO breakout sessions. So I will mention that later on. But first, let's talk about what's happening in the energy world today. Especially when you combine that with the large energy consumers, the big industrials. Last year, you spoke here at the conference for 600 people. Now over 1,000 people, over 1,000 people are joining us here today. But they're not in this great hall. We're staring at a big empty floor.
True.
But imagine all those people hearing you talk again. What happened since you spoke to us last year?
Right. Well, first of all, the dynamics are increasing and in a positive way. I think the upbeat introduction already illustrates that there is enthusiasm and drive. So, industrial initiative, companies getting together and saying we want to collaborate to work together on the technology deployment, on building the infrastructure, realizing the capacity. That is really on the move. And you don't only see that in the Netherlands, but also in other parts of Europe and also other parts of the world, in fact. So that is a very positive thing to observe. Another thing, a little bit from the policy arena, but I think critical, is that mission-oriented thinking, as it has been called, a mission-oriented approach, is, I think, now fully adopted. That's true for the Netherlands. It's the core of the transition policy, but it's also true for the European Union, and that is extremely meaningful.
But how has it changed when you compare it to last year?
Yeah, I think that is the fundamental difference is that up to the recent past, we were looking at policy targets in a rather traditional way. We need to reduce emissions every year. That is still important. There are targets for renewables, etc. But acknowledging that this is now a system change, it is about a whole trajectory of changing technologies, joint investment in infrastructure, different options coming together over a long period of time. That requires also sustained collaboration between industry, the research community, and policy. And that is, I think, in terms of the approach and the vision, what needs to happen, a fundamental change. And then, of course, the empty hall here, that is the big symbol of that we are all hit by a pandemic that was not foreseen last year. And we sustained serious economic damage. So that is really a concern also for the industries that we are looking at to invest. But
because some investments are putting down or putting on hold or
absolutely. So it is a concern. And at the same time, again, the policy response in the Netherlands, in Europe, other countries around us, has been we have to grow ourselves, invest ourselves out of this crisis. And we have to do it in a sustainable way. So the key target, actually, to get out of this economic turmoil is to go the sustainable way. That's a game changer. So the amounts of money that are being reserved on the European level, national level, are unprecedented. And can, in a way, maybe a year from now, 2 years from now, we may say, well, that is a really positive spin-off of a very bad year with the pandemic.
So, André Fay, what you're basically saying is two things. There is a momentum it is created now because of, one, the pandemic. So we have to make the change. We can do it now because there are funds. And the other thing is that there is more a fundamental approach with the industry, with the government, with all the research.
Exactly.
So this is the key moment is right now.
Right, exactly. And there's no time to waste. This is an old slogan, also from Greenpeace, but I think the notion is now broadly there and turned into action. So I'm actually quite excited about this period in time.
It's nice, André, that you mentioned Greenpeace. Because of our next guest, it's of course Mr. Diederik Samsom. He will be joining us in about 10 minutes, I guess. He has a history with Greenpeace, of course. And you mentioned Europe, and that's of course why we're going to meet Mr. Samsom, because of the Green Deal, because of all the funding that is here, and of course with all the local governments like the Dutch government, but they are having funds set aside as well. But the big chunk, the big part is of course the European Green Deal. So another thing, can you update us on where research is going? Because, well, you're talking a lot of power to X, all the power to X technologies. Any breakthroughs last year?
Well, breakthroughs in the sense, oh, here is the magic technology that will solve everything, like nuclear fusion. No, I think
still not. No.
No, and not to be negative about that, but the key notion, I think, that's on the table is we need all options combined. And this is a major message of the energy transition. It is just as much a major mission of the industrial transformation that we are looking at. If we want a zero-emission industry in 2050 that is also competitive, right? And that does not bump into all kind of critical boundaries of willing too much for one option on the other. It is a matter of combining everything.
So then we have to also combine nuclear energy in the whole energy mix.
It's immediately a nice example of a much debated technology. I think it is very wise, as a general standpoint, to have all options on the table and to keep all options on the table. Because we, at the moment, have very good progress, for example, on wind offshore. It's a fantastic development, reaching competitive cost levels. And we expect a lot from the North Sea. We can expect a lot from the North Sea. So the current talking, also from Frans Timmermans, just I think 2 weeks ago, 300 gigawatts of capacity on the North Sea wind offshore. That is possible, but it is 20 times as much as we have today. And we will then start to see the boundaries of the North Sea, literally. So that you also need space for fisheries and for transport, for ecological reasons. So wind offshore can do a lot, but not alone. So it is also about the CCS option, CCUS option. It is about bio-based industries. So one of the key alternatives for our petrochemical industry is to go to sustainable biomass resources for sustainable carbon in the chemicals and materials that we need as well. That's another key option. Electrifying process and of course circularity. Another problem we need to solve in the coming 3 decades is to move away from these singular value chains to closed production loops. And that will also have a profound influence on the entire industrial structure. So all these things need to be combined, need to contribute, and that can solve the puzzle.
And we have to keep all options at the table when it goes to the energy transition, and then we will have a bright and sustainable future.
We can, yes.
Okay. Please join us here this morning. Stay at the table because, well, as our main guest, you can interfere with all the other guests. Right. So please feel free to do that. André Fay, the scientific director at TNO Energy Transition. Then, before we go to our next guest, we have a very special guest here on stage because we have a pitch from Mark Peters. Mark Peters from Darrell. Mark, please join us here. Nice to have you. There's your pitch place.
Good morning.
You're the co-founder of Darrell, and in a few moments you will have a great pitch for us about what you're doing to make the energy transition happening, for example. But first, we have a little movie, and we're going to show it right now.
Yes.
Europe has set ambitious climate goals, a 55% reduction of CO2 emissions in 2030 and a low-carbon energy system in 2050. For many industries in Europe, and also for the built environment, this means a major transition. A large share of the current emissions come from the use of coal, oil or natural gas to produce electricity and for industrial processes that require vast amounts of heat. For some industrial processes, the industry can switch to green electricity. However, for high-temperature heat applications, this is not feasible. For heat applications up to 400 degrees Celsius, CO2 emission reduction can be achieved by switching from fossil fuels to concentrated solar thermal, or CST. This technology has been further improved by Aztec, a green energy company from Belgium. CST is a zero-carbon solution that, once installed, has no supply chain and makes optimal use of the often limited space at industrial sites. CST is a proven technology based on parabolic mirrors with collector tubes that generate high-temperature heat. These mirrors rotate with the movement of the sun and convert solar radiation to heat, 3 times more efficient than solar PV. The heat can easily be combined with other heat sources, and may be stored in modular thermal batteries that balance supply and demand during multiple days and nights. The Aztec CST platform is a competitive and zero-carbon alternative for industrial heat applications. And with this technology, the industry can reduce CO2 emissions in the short term and contribute to a sustainable future for everyone.
Mark.
Now, the installation shown in this video is one of the three proof of concept installation that has recently been installed in Belgium. Two of those installations are in full commercial operational mode. They produce steam for heating and cleaning tanks and containers, and also for chemical processes. My name is Mark Peters. I'm one of the co-founders and partner at Darrell, a Dutch energy company that has a very strong purpose of delivering the energy transition today. And we do this through our consultancy activities, where we support and we accelerate big energy transition projects in the Netherlands and also beyond, through facilitating a structured dialogue with companies, with industrial consortia. We align them behind a shared vision and strategy and a roadmap to success. Then through our education activities, we give master classes of the energy transition to schools, to universities, to businesses and organizations, and we try to inspire people to break the trend, think out of the box, and come up with innovative solutions. And then we have ventures, and with ventures we take skin in the game through seeking strategic alliances and participating in promising green energy companies in Europe. One of such companies is for example, Carbon Clean. This is a UK-based company that offers carbon capturing technology at low cost for industrial emitters. And we believe in it. We also believe in CCS as a no-regret option in order to achieve the rather ambitious climate goals. And that brings me to Aztec, the company which we showed in the video. We believe in Aztec, we believe in the company, we believe in the team, but we also believe in the business model of delivering heat as a service, so that the client can entirely focus on her core activities. And of course, we believe in the technology. The technology is technically fully certified by the most renowned knowledge institution in Europe. And a few words about the market development. You may wonder, why has it taken such a long time for the technology to become commercially available for industrial heat applications? And the answer is very simple. The technology just could not compete with fossil fuels. Take natural gas. It's a very efficient energy carrier. It is abundantly available. It's cheap. So, but times are changing. And in Spain, for example, where we have a high solar radiation, CST is already becoming competitive with natural gas, even without subsidies. In the Netherlands, in Northern Europe, where of course you have less solar radiation, the technology is competitive with natural gas thanks to the subsidies. But we expect those subsidies will no longer be required in the near future, when higher gas prices and higher CO2 prices will prevail. Now, in the meantime, we will just focus on optimizing the competitive advantage of CST and on further building our market portfolio in Europe. So if you've got any questions, by all means, you can contact us at the website or via the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your inspiring story. And indeed, you can contact Mark Peters directly via the Aztec website or via the Daryl website, but also via the network app, the app that we use today and tomorrow as well, the whole summit. Please download the networking app and then you can ask your questions to our guests here on stage. Use the Q&A function, and David just told me that there are already a lot of questions coming in. If you can't download the app for what kind of reason, then use the chat functionality in the stream. You can see it on your screen right now. Use the chat function, and you're also getting the chat messages here.
Yeah, I see the chat messages, and the exclamation mark is the quest section of the app.
Okay, use the exclamation mark, and then you can send in your questions. So let's go. Fast forward to our next guest, Mr. Diederik Samsom, Head of Cabinet of the Frans Timmermans team in Brussels at the European Commission. Mr. Samsom, welcome. Nice that you're joining us. I see the European flag, so you are in Brussels at this moment.
Well, you can take your flag everywhere, eh? But indeed, at the moment, I'm in that Berlaymont building in the center of Brussels, where we make that policy. Yeah.
Where you make the policy. You heard the opening of the show. You heard me just talking with André Vaey of TNO. We already talked about the energy transition, and we talked a bit about Greenpeace and of the Green Deal of Frans Timmermans and the team you're joining. So please, can you update us? What's the status of all those funds and the projects that you're that you're funding?
Well, at the moment, we are in a pretty exciting week because we are 2 days ahead of the European Council, in which the new goal for 2030, the minus 55% goal, so 55% emission reduction compared to 1990, might be agreed upon by 27 countries. And that's what we worked for in the last year towards this milestone. Because a year ago, which seems now like ages ago, obviously, pre-corona, we presented that overarching environmental policy for Europe, the so-called European Green Deal. And the main thing of that European Green Deal is actually that for once, politicians didn't settle for the feasible, for the lowest common denominator. For once, we went for the thing that was needed, the urgency at hand, and hence the goal of becoming completely climate neutral in 2050, requiring a minus 55 goal in 2030, but also other goals, the stop of loss of biodiversity, because comparing apples to pears, biodiversity loss might be just as big or even a bigger threat to future generations as climate change. But also the goal, the ambition to stop further pollution, completely stop further pollution of our soil, our water, and our air. We have polluted enough. And those three goals were put into one plan. And that's also different from the past, because normally you would see from Brussels dozens of plans, one on energy, one on transport, one on industry, one on water, one on nature, and more than often they would conflict each other. And now we made one overarching, consistent strategy towards that single goal, which is preserving our ecosystem for future generations. And since that year, we've worked our asses off to make that happen. And our world was turned upside down, like everyone's world, by COVID-19. And then something interesting happened, because what normally happens in these cases is that when there is a urgency at hand, an immediate crisis that needs all our attention, our political capital and our financial capital, normally the long-term vision, the dot on the horizon, the long-term strategy would be shelved in the drawer for later, because we now have something else to do. That happened before, it happened many times. And this time was different, because while this you could say this is the biggest urgency that we have ever at hand, COVID-19, we didn't shelve the Green Deal. We put it front and center. We made it our answer to COVID-19. The recovery of Europe, the recovery from this corona crash, will be a green recovery. So instead of shelving the Green Deal, we put it on steroids. With more public money than ever available, with more ambition than ever available, and with more consistency than we had ever available. So if there is one moment in time that we can make this ambition happen, it's now.
And that's basically what André also told us, that this is the momentum because of, well, all the science combined gives us more and more answers, and the funding is still there. But when you look, Mr. Samsom, at all the companies that have to, well, that have to realize the Green Deal, some of them are in trouble at this moment. Is the European Commission also there for them?
Yes, and that's what I say. It's actually, I mean, even before Corona, we knew that this was a big challenge for industry. So we made our Sustainable Europe Investment Plan, in which we sort of made a calculation of what is needed to make this happen. Well, if you only look at our energy system, which is a big chunk of the task, not everything, but a big chunk, we're talking at a required investment of about 350 billion each year in the next 10 years, in the next 10 years alone. That can't be all public money, obviously. So what we were envisaging is loads of incentives to pull private money into this new investment cycles. And after Corona, it's still the same challenge, but the balance has shifted a little because we know that private balance sheets have evaporated or at least diminished to a certain extent. So there's more public money needed. So now we are in a situation that we actually borrow the money from future generations to save the ecosystem for future generations. So we better do it right, because actually it's their money that we
it's
are
their
now
money.
spending.
And therefore, it only can be a fair deal if you do it right. Let's see if there are any questions from our audience. David.
There's a lot of discussion about whether we should create our own energy or make our own energy, or we better import energy. We are a country of importing and distribution.
All right, and that's from the Dutch point of view. So whether we should import green energy from countries like Norway,
like a European view, why don't we get our energy from, let's say,
from Morocco with all the solar panels?
Exactly.
Okay, Mr. Samsom, should we be energy independent as a European Union, or is it not a big problem that we use green energy from, well, what we're saying, like the Sahara Desert, or energy, solar energy produced in Morocco?
Well, we will never be completely energy independent. We're too many people on too small a continent to make that happen. But we will lessen our dependence a lot. Our impact assessment, looking at the future at 2030, but also at 2050, tells us that we can save about 30 trillion euros in terms of imported energy. And we will not only lessen our dependence, we will also diversify our dependence. Because at the moment it's Russia or the Middle East, and that's it. Well, America did do some work in the so-called dash for shale gas, but that is a temporary phenomenon. But we will diversify our dependence. And indeed, Morocco was mentioned. We have developed a strategy for hydrogen, for the hydrogen economy of the future. Looking at 2030, we are looking at a 40 gigawatt production capacity in Europe. So 40 gigawatt in electrolyzers to be fed with green energy. Quite a challenge. But also 40 gigawatt around Europe. So Northern Africa, obviously, because of the cheap solar available, but also Ukraine as an example where cheap wind energy is available. I mean, in Ukraine, land is cheap, wind is abundant. So there's many options to create cheap renewable energy in areas not within Europe, but just around Europe, and then we can import it. Either directly the electricity via high voltage lines, or indirectly via hydrogen.
Okay, André, do you have something to add to this vision?
Well, it confirms that all options need to contribute at the same time. And indeed, the point on energy independence, that is something we are not, and we are part of global energy markets, and that will be true for future hydrogen for sure. That can come from other regions in the world. I think also biomass trade, which is also part of our mix, will become increasingly important as well. So it is confirming, let's say, the story that we need a mix of option in a sustained strategy.
Because we simply don't have enough resources, we don't have enough land, we don't have enough biomass to be completely independent.
Right.
And we never will be. That's a harsh message.
Right.
There's one option Mr. Samson didn't mention, and that's the option of investing in nuclear power. Mr. Samson?
Well, we do. Actually, the European budget still invests 5 billion euros every 7 years in that fusion quest, which is obviously the holy grail of the future.
Yeah.
But to be fair, it has been a holy grail for quite some time. And it promised to us to be there in 30 years. But that promise is there for 30 years now. So we are in a situation that I'm an engineer, I'm an optimist. I think humans can do incredible things. So I know for certain that humans will be able to harness nuclear energy in a safe and sustainable way, either by fusion or by fifth generation fission. That solution will only arrive too late for Europe, which is not a big disaster. I mean, Europe can solve its energy problems with the current and the incoming technologies that we have at hand. But we should also realize that the world doesn't stop at the borders of Europe. We have a continent south of us called Africa, in which 1 billion extra people will live in the next 30 to 50 years. And 2.5 billion people in total will hopefully get more wealthy than they are right now. Cities like Kinshasa will have 70 million inhabitants somewhere around the halfway of this century. Lagos the same, and people hardly know where they are. Nuclear might be a solution to provide energy for such a huge amount of people over such a small area. I don't know. I'm not certain. Human, as I said, innovation is an incredible thing. It always takes you to around corners that you didn't expect. And maybe it is the solution. It is, though, as I said, fair to say that solution, if it will be there, will be too late for Europe.
Yeah.
As I said, it will be icing on the cake for our grandchildren if we ever develop it.
All right. André.
Yeah, one remark, let's say, the developments around the Green Deal, the European momentum is fantastic news. I think that is a game changer, but one weak spot. And that is that in the negotiations about the budget, actually the budget for innovation and research were hard hit. There was some repair work, but that was a remarkable thing to happen because innovation, declining cost of all these new technologies that we want at a large scale, is the major driver for a sustainable and also competitive energy transition. And that was hard to match. So I'm curious what Mr. Samson
has to say about
that.
Yeah.
That trade-off was part of the game.
I completely agree.
Okay.
This was a bitter pill, hard to swallow. It works as follows. The European Commission makes a proposal for a new budget for the next 7 years and hands that over to Council, which is 27 heads of state and government. And in all their wisdom and greed, those 27 heads of state and government decided that the budget could be a little lower than we anticipated, than we proposed. And due to the dynamics of the discussion with, may I say, the Netherlands at the forefront of the frugals being, pleading for a lower budget, and also at the forefront of loving the horizon, the innovation budget more than others, what happened was what actually always happens. The other countries say, well, if you want to spend less money, take your own darlings, kill your own darlings. So here you are with less innovation money. It's one of the things not to be proud of within the European machinery of making decisions and making compromises.
So your answer,
Luckily,
Mr. Samson, is about how politics in Brussels work, and basically you're blaming the Netherlands for not wanting to spend.
The Netherlands is part of this system, but indeed the approach the Netherlands took was had this consequence, and actually that's not new. 7 years ago it was exactly the same, and 14 years ago it was exactly the same. So it is the cynical truth of how you call that, hitting yourself in the stomach. But and apparently Netherlands is always willing and able to swallow that. Luckily, Parliament, after this happened, Parliament repaired some of that damage, and obviously the extra money that we have in the Corona and the recovery funds, the 750 billion euros, will be well spent. So in the end, the research community will have much more money to spend than we had, but obviously a little more would have been helpful.
That's but that's great news anyway. We go to one more question from our viewers, from the audience. Please keep sending in your questions. We've got the next speaker coming up in a few moments, but one more question for Mr. Samson.
Yeah, Geert-Henk Wijnands is even quoting Dwight D. Eisenhower. He once said, "Plans are nothing, planning is everything. This seemingly calls for a clear roadmap, including all investments. When will the roadmap be confirmed to everyone, so everyone has a shared outlook on future developments?" So he's asking for a roadmap from. I think you're working on that in the Green Deal, but maybe you can explain a little bit more about what we're going to do next year and maybe the next 10 years, and so further on.
Well, if I could show you my whole office wall, but this is only a very small part of it, that's part of the roadmap. My whole wall, all my walls here are plastered with the roadmap. I sometimes feel a general in a new war, having to win battle for battle. But indeed, this is a very pertinent question. Plans are nothing, planning is everything. So what we're doing right now is we had that plan, the Green Deal communication, or the Green Deal strategy last December, and we now rolling out bit for bit, piece for piece, taking care that everything is consistent with each other. And as I said, in September, last September, we published the climate target plan, the impact assessment that brings us to the minus 55%. But that has to be, if the leaders will agree on that in this Thursday, fingers crossed, we will have to put that all in legislation, about 12 pieces of legislation, a pile like this in pieces of paper to make that happen. We have given ourselves 5 years to make this happen. Not to complete the Green Deal, obviously, because we need a few decades for that. But in 5 years' time, we need to put Europe on a pathway towards that sustainable future, an irrevocable, unchangeable pathway.
Yeah.
And as I said, that's why we are in a hurry, because we've given ourselves 5 years to do that.
Yeah, but 5 years is still a reasonable time for such a big transition. The question asker quoted Mr. Eisenhower, that's a big one to quote. But if you quote Mr. Kennedy, John F. Kennedy, who said, well, in the 60s we're going to put a man on the moon, and only after that plans were made, technology was developed. So you can do it both ways. So the Green Deal, the dot on the horizon is 2050 CO2 neutral. That's the Kennedy vision, and the Samson vision is more practical, hands-on. That's what we like, of course, as Dutch. Within 5 years, we have the legislation, we have the plans, and we will make it happen. So that's basically a great start of this morning, because I feel energized, and well, I'm actually believing in it, Mr. Samson. So please make this happen.
Yeah.
All right. Stay with us, please, because we have 3 more speakers coming up. But you, of course, can also interfere with the next guest, and maybe they have questions for you as well. So we'll meet you later on, and we go to our next guest, and that's Anja Isabel Doodsenrath. Anja Isabel is the CEO of RWE Renewables. Anja, welcome to our program. You're joining us from Germany, I guess? We can't hear you in the studio, but I see you're talking. I will introduce you further on, please, and then we fix your microphone.
Okay.
So now I can hear you. In the Netherlands, we know RWE of the coal plants. You've got still a lot of them running, and don't shut them off right now because we need the energy still. But you are you're investing a lot in renewables. That's why you're their CEO. So that's solar, that's wind. Is it also biomass?
It is also biomass, exactly. Yeah, I mean, thanks. First of all, thanks for having me today. Great to be with you. The third passionate engineer is joining the discussion, as I figured out, because I'm also an electrical engineer and clearly passionate about the energy transition. Thank you, Mr. Samson, for the great vision, the man on the moon moment last year. And I'm absolutely optimistic that we can make it happen. Indeed, Joost, you said, and you mentioned that RWE is now heavily investing in renewables. In fact, this is clearly the core of our company strategy. I mean, 120 years in power generation, but relying on fossil fuels. That will change. We'll be carbon neutral in 2040. And therefore, we go all in on renewables and are already today one of the biggest renewables companies globally, which not many people know, but this is the reality.
That's the reality. And well, you started in Germany with what you call die Groene Wende. What's the status of all those projects today?
Well, I mean, Germany as the rest of Europe and many parts across the world are basically on an energy transition. In Germany, we have been, so to say, leading the way for many, many years, but policy not always, let's say, works in the right direction. So again, big hopes for what's coming from Europe. And we lost a little bit the momentum, but I'm very optimistic that we will catch up again.
That you will catch up again. What would your question for Mr. Samson be? Of maybe what's your wish you have for all those people in Brussels?
Oh, I think, first of all, I have to say thank you for really bold strides, for a very bold vision, and for staying the course in Corona times. I think, indeed, Corona can be the accelerator for the energy transition in Europe, and we should make use of it. Great, let's say, announcements in recent weeks. The Offshore Act, fantastic. So what's next? That would be my question. What can we look for next?
All right, Mr. Samson, what will be next?
Well, literally, what will be next is the battery strategy that we will publish tomorrow, in which we will outline our ambitions for, well, one of the key components of the renewable energy strategy, which is batteries. Obviously, you've seen that we have created a battery alliance, mustering all innovative and industrial power in Europe, not to lose this technology to the Chinese or the Americans, like we did, unfortunately, with, for instance, solar PV. So that's what's next on our agenda. Also this Wednesday, so we just moving week by week, we're moving on, is our mobility strategy. We have a huge challenge at hand within our transport system within Europe. It's the most cumbersome sector. To be honest, it didn't reduce a single molecule of CO2 emissions in the last 20 years. It has to reduce 85% CO2 emissions in the next 3 decades, including airplanes, including ships, including heavy trucks, long-haul transport systems. So we have to overhaul that whole system, and we will present a strategy to do that tomorrow.
Right.
So that's next, and then obviously we go into Christmas like everybody else. I think after this year, everybody needs a little break.
Yeah, we do.
And we pick up where we left it in the new year.
All right. So, Isabel,
many thanks.
Yeah, two things coming up. Let's focus on the first one because, well, this summit is about industry and energy combined. with André, we talked about being energy independent as Europe. Mr. Samson already explained, well, that will never happen, unfortunately. But can we reach almost energy independency? What's your vision?
Well, I would say, first of all, the vision for carbon neutrality is clear, and there are multiple pathways, and we discussed, let's say, some aspects of it today. But if you look at what the major scientists say, these pathways have one thing in common, that the power sector is really the central switchboard.
Yeah.
And if you look at Europe today, we meet 75% of our primary energy demand by fossil fuels. And by 2050, roughly the same share will be satisfied by renewable energy. And I think it has been mentioned already that the world, Europe, will massively electrify. So it's not only about the power sector, but it's also about the transport sector, at least parts of the transport sector, the building sector. And I think it's fascinating to bring this vision to life. And I think the technologies are there. It has been mentioned already also by André. I mean, offshore wind, onshore wind, solar are competitive with fossil fuels today. And I think the industry is ready to make it happen. And if you look at what it means in terms of capacity additions, because we're talking nothing less than a absolutely fundamental redesign of our energy system. Yeah? If we completely switch from fossil to renewables or carbon-free fuels, I mean, we need massive investments in grids, massive investment in ports, as we heard this morning as well, massive supply chain investments. And we basically need to almost double up the capacity additions we see today in wind and solar if we want to bring the vision of carbon neutrality in 2050 to life. So renewables is really at the heart of it.
Yeah, it's all about investing. Let's see if there are questions from our audience for you, Anja, Isabel. Well, tell us, David.
There's a lot of discussion about most people in Holland know RWE as switching from coal to biomass. And there's a bit of, there are two ways to look at it. One, the one is looking at a necessary option. The other say, well, it's coal, but a little less worse, or other says it's even worse. So I wonder what RWE's vision is on biomass and how it can contribute to the whole energy system.
Great question, Anja. Anja, Isabel?
Yeah, great question. Thank you very much for it. I mean, I can tell you what our vision is. Our vision is to dedicate our energy for a sustainable life. And our goal is clearly to be carbon neutral by 2040. And you know that we are still a very prominent emitter of CO2 these days, but this will change. But I would also like to link my answer to what we heard from André. We cannot rule out, and we should not rule out, all the technology options which are on the table. So, I mean, if you look at where we invest these days, the vast majority of our investments go in offshore wind, onshore wind, solar, battery storage, green hydrogen. But clearly, we also don't rule out biomass if we can be sure that the biomass we burn in the power plants comes from certified sources. And I think that's very, very important as well.
But still, to transport the biomass to the power plants, well, that generates a lot of CO2, even if the biomass itself is certified. You're saying, well, we don't rule out biomass for now, but is it the plan that if solar, if wind can replace it, that you're going to kill biomass, or?
Well, I think I would phrase it as follows. I think the clear strategic focus is on scaling wind, offshore wind, onshore wind, and solar. That's clearly the heart of the strategy, and these are the scalable technologies. Biomass is a niche and will always be a niche, but I don't think it would be wise to rule it out now if we can if we can source it sustainably, and if the transport logistics are, let's say, not excessive.
Okay, not excessive. André Fay, TNO.
Yeah. It's not a question, but more a contribution to the biomass debate. I said it's one of the key options we need in the portfolio. What we see in the scenarios for Europe, for the world, in fact, IPCC, etc., is that the role of biomass will grow and that it will shift from today power and heat to feedstock and sustainable fuels on the medium to longer term. So that's also part of a gradual transition and a shift in the infrastructure that we have to use it. And the perceived contradiction between biomass sustainability, I think, is really a misconception. Because we know, because certification was already mentioned, and that is backed by a lot of insight in how you properly source biomass, how you manage your forest well. Like in Sweden, Finland, there is decades of experience how to manage forest well and use it partly also for bioenergy. It is about proper use of land. For example, mobilizing marginal degraded lands that are eroded and replanting them with forests. So this is not about competition. It's about more biomass, more forest cover, and therefore also more sustainable growth. So these are the key ways to let biomass contribute to that future sustainable energy system. And also in the global scenarios, we see a role of 20-25% of future energy supplies that come from sustainable biomass. So in that sense, that's a contribution I would like to make to this. And if I may, a question also to Anja.
Please do.
We talked about investment. That is the key. And also Mr. Samson emphasized there is public money, but the bulk of it needs to come from industry. Does RWE already have an investment strategy to really phase out the coal and the brown coal?
Wow.
Absolutely. I mean, if you look at our strategy today, more than 95% of our funds go into wind, solar, and battery storage projects around the world. And this is the core of RWE's strategy. And we have a very, very clear plan how to get to carbon neutrality by 2040 by phasing out in Germany lignite power generation. I think there is the contract with the German government, and we see very similar situations in the UK, where we have closed the last coal-fired power station, and we will see the same transition in other parts of Europe where we are active. So the plan is totally clear. Our commitment is totally clear. And I think another maybe good piece of information or confirmation is that we have been certified to be a company which has a very clear transition path toward carbon neutrality recently by an external by an external audit. So we will comply fully with the Paris Agreement, and this is very important for us, obviously.
All right. So it's really great to hear that the transition is already taking place, and that basically all your investments are going to renewables right now. So well, thank you, of course, for that, and also thank you for contributing to our program. Anja, please also stay put if you would, because maybe we have some more questions for you after the next part of the program. Anja Isabel Doodsenraad from RWE Renewables. For the next 5 minutes, we go to Norway because there is Thomas Palkovic from Energy Nest. Energy Nest, he will explain it itself. It's about storage, it's about batteries, it's about renewables. Thomas, you're joining us. Before I'll give you the floor for your pitch, let's watch a little video explaining about Energy Nest.
At Energy Nest, we're making large-scale energy storage an economical and environmental opportunity for power plants and energy-intensive industries. Our objective is to help our customers to increase their energy efficiency and asset flexibility, and at the same time reduce their carbon footprint. We do this by storing and time-shifting heat at high temperature in thermal batteries. We are building our thermal batteries using prefabricated modules, together with our strong partners and certified suppliers. Prefabricated by ISO-certified suppliers off-site. All fabrication and pressure testing witnessed by third party. Flexible and lean manufacturing. Highest customer value for the lowest cost. Our modular thermal battery is scalable and customizable for any application. The modules are composed of abundant, recyclable and non-hazardous geomaterials. Each module has the size of a standard 20-foot shipping container. This makes both transport and installation very easy. Easy integration. Foundation with 3 to 5 modules. 20 to 25 modules. 90 times 2 modules. Fully cladded and finished thermal battery. We deliver our thermal batteries to our customers to help them meet the requirements for a sustainable and competitive energy future. Our thermal battery technology will enable a more responsible use of energy, helping to balance supply and demand whenever needed for individual facilities as well as the power grids. Energy Nest will work with you to customize a thermal battery solution from initial assessment through to commissioning and operation. We will help prepare your company to meet future legislation on environmental performance and decarbonization. Let's get ready for a clean future.
Tomas Palkovic from Energy Nest, welcome in our program. We've got a few more minutes. Please give us your pitch about Energy Nest and about what you want to achieve.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us here today. Really appreciate that. Yeah, what we often forget when we speak about energy, most people think only electricity, while about 2/3 or 60% of what energy used worldwide are in thermal energy, in heat. The majority of that energy used and or needed is then also emitted finally from whatever production process we're looking at or about. And the thermal battery of Energy Nest actually resolves those unbalances between energy needs in its availability in the thermal world. Energy Nest has set up a functional supply chain with our main hub in the port of Rotterdam, from where we can dispatch our battery modules, which are fairly easy to be integrated in pretty much all sorts of industries that can benefit from it. We have already booked our first success too. We have shipped not long ago our first commercial project to the decarbonizing project of Italian Eni at one of their refineries. And I think what's most important to understand is that a thermal battery is a product that has an extremely wide contribution or fit range. It goes all the way from what we have seen from Mark Peters before, from concentrated solar power or concentrated solar thermal applications into power generation. The thermal battery can serve a very vast variety of different processes across the foundation industry, energy intensive industries, all the way to food processing, for example. And today it can be seen as a transition technology to enable that full decarbonization that is starting right now, while it is also the same applicability of this thermal battery technology as we change the fuels. So we are not dependent to decarbonize processes which are running on natural gas today. The exactly same process and contribution can also happen when we one day run our processes on hydrogen, for example, in the steel or other foundation industries. In the early phase, we foresee coming a very strong push into the electrification of a lot of industries. And Ms. Dosenrath, I'm sure you will confirm that producing renewable electricities can sometimes be a challenge to provide the right amounts at the right times. So the thermal battery can also, in context of electrification, contribute to allow absorb wind or solar power when we have even only slight overcapacities and provide to demanding industry steam supply on a 24/7 basis, uninterrupted without any additional CO2 emissions. So what we are doing, and we said it in the video too, we can support, consult and guide our clients to finding the best and most economical solutions to their demands and challenges. Yeah, we have stuff in Europe, in Northern Europe and in the UK to support all these efforts and can centrally from Rotterdam ship our products with the focus currently mostly on Europe. We're open for any questions. You can approach us at any time. You find us on the internet at energy-nast.com. And please feel free to approach us as you have a demand where a thermal battery can help you overcome your challenges.
All right.
Thank you very much for my minutes.
Thank you very much. Thomas Pelkovic from Energy-Nest, the thermal battery company. Let's move on with the program here in the studio. We have 2 more guests for you lining up, and we have 20 more minutes left here on the talk show. Next guest, Bert van der Linge. He's the Dutch Consul General at Antwerp, and I would like to talk with Mr. van der Linge about the role and opportunities of neighboring countries in the European energy transition, basically about also the collaboration between the Antwerp and Rotterdam Harbour District. Mr. van der Linge, welcome here at our program. How is that collaboration going on?
Well, it is going on. I'm very happy to say that. Apart from Rotterdam, Port of Rotterdam and the Port of Antwerp being healthy competitors, as you know, in the European Union, competition is always good. There are clear outlooks into, let's say, further future cooperation in the field of energy transition, but also in the field of modernizing mobility. And I'm happy to say also that we need to gradually see that we should depart from a vision of being part of a delta. I might remind you that the Rotterdam-Antwerp area is actually the starting point of 3 TEN-Ts in Europe, which makes us, let's say, a very important partner in the energy transition, but also an important partner in the mobility transition. I'm very curious to see the mobility strategy which will come out. Maybe as a thought, we are all currently working on an activity in spring 21 on the sustainability of inland transport, which is a major economic activity in terms of transport and in terms of tonnage. So that is something which is really important also for us. In the energy transition, no country is alone. So we try to actually highlight the opportunities we have as the Netherlands, but also as Belgium or Flanders, in terms of cooperating and trying to carve out a niche for our own industry, because we do have also industry which is very much active and innovative in the field of energy transition.
Well, and of course, in Antwerp and in Rotterdam are of course all those companies who use a lot of energy. Do you have already one inspiring example you can share with us, or maybe a dream from you personally about such collaboration between companies?
Should we quote Martin Luther King? Having a dream. Yes. Well, there is a dream, and that constitutes a triangle. What we try to accomplish or to promote is the idea that offshore wind energy, CCS or CCUS, and hydrogen are in fact a part of the same triangle. You need to see that in combination with each other. Because if you look at the chemical cluster in Antwerp, which is the second largest cluster in the world after Houston, and it creates a lot of emissions, almost a third of all the emissions in Belgium alone. What if part of that emission could be captured,
and used
let's say
again.
CO2 captured for, let's say, transport through pipelines through Rotterdam and on to the North Sea to depleted gas fields such as Porthos. This is a project which is now recognized as an interesting project for the future, but it would create also a necessity to cooperate internationally.
Okay, André, could you respond on that? That's about, of course, CCS, when you store the CO2 in the ground in old fields.
Sure.
Is this a temporary solution, or well, can we maintain that in the road to 2050?
It is the CCS option is a structural part of our entire strategy towards the year 2100, even not even the 2050 target. So let me explain, because on the one hand, the CCS option is needed on the short term to already be on the pathway to have these steep reductions. But with these large industrial clusters, we will not make it. So that's one. But the second thing is that we are already in an overshoot situation with our emissions to stay within the 1.5 and maybe even a 2 degree target. So there is already so much CO2 in the atmosphere, and we have so much fossil infrastructure still operating for years to come, that we will need negative emissions in already this first half of the century, definitely the second half of the next century, to compensate for that overshoot of emissions. And negative emissions
really an important part of the strategy.
Exactly. And negative emissions are especially you can realize them by sustainable biomass, new chemical industry, and CO2 capture and storage. Then you get a negative chain. Direct air capture is also a possibility, and that can be part of that future chemical industry. So we are looking at a future that these industrial clusters can realize negative emissions, which is in a business perspective very interesting, because suppose there is a sustained CO2 price, which is what we want, and industries can earn money by that. Then you really have a competitive advantage on the map, and that would be fantastic for Antwerp and Rotterdam, the entire ARA cluster, as we call it, that is combined the largest chemical industry in the world. So if we can realize those conditions for zero to negative emission production in the coming decades, we have a competitive advantage on the world map that is unprecedented.
Well, that's actually a really interesting thing to talk further about. Let's go to Mr. Samson one more time, because I heard CO2 pricing as mentioned by. Well, of course, then we also think about Brussels. It's an interesting business case, isn't it, Mr. Samson? That when we have negative emissions, then we can close the loop ecologically and also economically.
Yeah, first of all, indeed, to reach climate neutrality in 2050, we need negative emissions, both in terms of natural things, forests and agricultural land, but also technological solutions like CCS or CCU. The development of that requires CO2 pricing. And that's the reason why in June next year, we will come up with the new legislation for the new emission trading system up to 2030 and further. And obviously the main very simple measure in that new emission trading system is that we will increase the so-called linear reduction factor, which will mean that each year we take more allowances off the market, making the remaining allowances more scarce, and therefore giving them a higher price. What the price will be, that's up to the market. Civil servants from the European Commission are not allowed to speculate on that, but it will be a higher price than today. And most of the companies like RWE will have their own calculations made and base their investment decisions on those new prices. And we are exiting a phase in which the CO2 price was actually hardly a factor because of the high volatility. Sometimes it was almost zero. Well, how to base an investment decision on a zero price. But now we have a stable pricing above 20 euros per ton. It survived the Corona crash. It's now increasing to 30 or more because companies are anticipating the things that we are doing in terms of giving it a higher price. So we will get into a completely new era of investment decisions that will be driven by CO2 prices. And you can see that first and foremost in the coal-fired power stations. There's a lot of policy discussions also in the Netherlands about closing them, but actually they are a liability all over the place. So basically, coal-fired power is out of business. And I would encourage governments to indeed plan on those, because you need to guide only socially you need to guide those transitions.
Yeah.
But you don't have to worry about subsidizing the closure of a coal-fired power station
because the market is doing it itself because of the CO2 pricing. Anja Isabel, Doodsenraad, coal power is is out of business. I guess as an energy company based moving to renewables, you agree with that?
Absolutely. I mean, I would phrase it even stronger. I mean, we are not only moving to renewables. I mean, the vast majority of, let's say, RWE's income today is from renewables. We are a renewable company. And of course, we are now in a, let's say, socially acceptable way, phasing out our coal assets. And that's a way forward. That's a trend which is unreversible, I think, because everybody, absolute everybody, is fully, let's say, focused on bringing the vision of carbon neutrality to life by 2050. And this is all our, I mean, if you look across the industries, strategies are absolutely focused on achieving that target.
Okay. Anja Isabel, Doodsenraad, thank you very much for joining us here today. The same for Mr. Diederik Samson. We move on with the program here. We still got Bert van der Lingen, of course, joining us, and we have our next speaker. But we also have questions from the audience. David.
Yeah, well, to Mr. van der Lingen, maybe also to Mr. Samson, but most of the questions the topics we heard comes down to infrastructure, and I think we need to join forces to make it happen, make CCS happen, make electrification happen. So the question to Mr. Samson maybe is, and Mr. van der Lingen is working on that, I think, in Antwerp. How can we join forces between Belgium, Netherlands, but also Germany, maybe even France? But let's start with small and get it further on.
Yeah. Okay, Mr. van der Lingen, how can we join forces?
It's quite simple, actually. If you look at the targets which are ahead in terms of transport efficiency, in terms of our climate targets. I would like to give an example in terms of inland shipping, which is a very clear one, and that's a project which has been initiated by the Dutch provinces of South Holland, Gelderland, and the German land of North Rhine-Westphalia. They have concluded that they need to restructure the inland shipping fuel supply system with the possibility of hydrogen bunkering. This is called the Rhine project, which makes it possible to create a transport route, basically in future, fueled by hydrogen. What we have proposed as well, of course, from our point of view in Antwerp is, why not take it a step further and make a connection between Rotterdam and Antwerp? And then, as you are at it, just also do the same thing for the Albert Canal. And you mentioned France. We of course have in future the connection between the canal connection between Paris and the North Sea port, which is called the Seine-Nord. If you already now preemptively start with making this route ready for hydrogen transport, hydrogen-powered transport, then you are a step ahead.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, a very nice example, because in the future we have blue hydrogen and even, of course, that's better, green hydrogen available in large quantities, hopefully, because we need so. Last guest on the show, it's time to continue, is Mr. Klaus Schäfer. He's Chief Technology Officer at Covestro. Mr. Schäfer, welcome at our program. You're one of the front runners as it goes to CCUS. And well, to start with, you say, well, CO2 and capturing CO2 is a bit of a dead dog. Can you explain that?
I've used that example several times. Yeah. if you want to use CO2 chemically,
Yeah.
that is difficult, yeah, because it is a dead dog. It's the lowest level on the energy scale, and if you want to use it, you need to reactivate it. You need power in the way of hydrogen, in electrical power. However, you need energy to reactivate it and bring it back to something more useful. That has been the dream of chemists over more than a century. And what we are seeing over the last, let's say, decades, is that things are moving into reality. We as Covestro, we had a project which we have called Dream Reaction, where we use CO2 to bring it into polymer chains. The technical name is polyethers, which are then used to produce polyurethanes. You find them in mattresses, in sofas, in insulation of refrigerators, in insulation of buildings, and so on. So yes, it's a dead dog, and you really need to push the dead dog to make it alive again. But it's possible, and it's happening. Our dream reaction has turned in dream production, and we have built a plant with 5,000 tons of that product. First type of economic pilot plant in Dormagen 3 years ago.
Okay, and it's still running. And are you upscaling that plant at this moment?
Yeah, we are with that product. We are using that product to test the market. We are using that pilot plant to further develop the process and to work on the upscaling.
All right.
Usually, this upscaling in chemical industry needs time. That's not happening as quickly as we are used to see that in our smartphones or in that type of industry.
Yeah. Of course, we know. I would like to ask you something else about your vision for 2030, 2050, because as I mentioned in the introduction, you are a front runner on a lot of trains. Also, the CCUS part of the transition.
What we have, and I very much liked what Mr. Samson has said there, that through the pandemic we should not only focus on that, but continue working on the other stuff, and that has worked on the political level very well. I think also in our company we have been successful managing both at the same time. So we have, in spring this year, we have communicated our new vision, which is to become fully circular. We have looked and tried to understand how all this fits together. What we are currently doing is we are living in a type of linear world. We are digging something out of the ground. If it's oil or gas or whatever it is, we process it, we produce stuff, we use it, and then we throw it away. What we need to come into a world, if we want to really make it sustainable, is where we capture it at the end of life and use it as raw materials again. And that is really our big target. And in this world, you also cannot imagine fossil fuels anymore.
So that's quite of a big vision. André Fay was nodding a lot, and maybe if you're watching us, well, you're nodding as well, because this is what it is about. This is what it is about, to make it circular, of course. I would like to thank you very much, Mr. Klaus Schäfer, for joining us here today. And the same goes, of course, for Mr. Diederik Samson, for Bert van Lingen, for Anja Isabel Doodsenrats, and for the guests here at the table, for André Fay. Thank you very much. Also, David van Baarle, thank you very much for being the voice of the audience. We'll meet again at the TNO sessions this afternoon. You can join us there. It's after the lunch break. And before it's time to go to lunch, I will mention what the rest of the program is here today. At 11 o'clock sharp, Project 625. It's about a nice partnership with FME, will be explained here. And at 11:50, you will have practical examples of energy efficiency and electrification by Bilfinger Thebodin, also from here. And then, of course, there's the program with Wim at the Eemshaven. You can join a lot of sessions from there as well. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. The European Industry and Energy Summit, well, we took off with this talk show. Thanks again for joining us, and we will meet later on in the program. Have a great day.